Well, welcome everyone to today's session, which is about relative pronouns. This is part one of our lesson on this topic because it's a large topic, so we're going to cover it in two parts. Today we're going to look at the function of relative pronouns, as well as the different categories of relative pronouns, and we'll finish with a little summary and usage guide, because they're rather complicated. What does a relative pronoun do? Well, a relative pronoun connects a noun to a clause that gives us information about that noun. Now, this clause is called a relative clause, but it's also called an adjective clause because, like an adjective, it tells us more about this noun. So let's look at an example. The sentence is, I picked up some organic eggs. Organic is an adjective that tells us more about the noun eggs. But we can also say something like, I picked up the eggs which were on the top shelf. Again, this phrase, this clause, were on the top shelf, gives us information about the eggs, and it's connected to eggs with which. Which is the relative pronoun, and were on the top shelf is the relative or adjective clause. So that's what they do. Let's look at their categories. The first one is relative pronouns referring to people. There are three of them: who, whom, and whose. For example, I love people who speak their mind. I prefer friends with whom I can be honest. So if we have a preposition before who, then who changes to whom. But especially in British English, we tend to avoid whom by separating the preposition from it. So in British English, it's a lot more common to hear, I prefer friends who I can be honest with. Now, in American English, they may still separate the preposition, but keep whom. So you may also hear, I prefer friends whom I can be honest with. Now, and if we have a possession relationship between the noun and the clause, then we use the word whose. I like listening to individuals whose opinions belonging to individuals, differ from mine. So that's the first category, who, whom, and whose for people. The next one is relative pronouns that refer to objects, and there are two of these, which and whose. For example, I love things which can be recycled, and clothes whose labels are intact can be resold. Now, because whose is usually used for people, I always get the question, can we use of which instead of whose for objects? Because whose is for people. Well, yes, we can also say clothes, the labels of which are intact, can be resold, or clothes of which the labels are intact can be resold. But as you can see, this is a much more complicated structure and it does sound quite formal. So I'd recommend you stick to whose. Get used to using whose both for people and objects. Now, there is another very common relative pronoun, and that's that. What about that? We can use that with both people and objects, but it's more common with objects. Now, this word that is particularly useful when it's difficult to decide if a noun refers to people or objects. For example, when we have things like company, team, group, is that the entity or the people in the entity? So let's have a look with I love people, who is your best choice? I love people who, but that is also correct, speak their mind. With I love things, that is more common, which is still correct. I love things that or which can be recycled. But if you have a noun like organization, now are we talking about the one thing or are we talking about the people in the organization? A bit vague. That is your best choice. I'm in touch with an organization that can help us. Now, there are a couple of cases where we cannot use that, and that is we cannot use that to replace whom if there's a preposition before it, or we cannot use it instead of whose. So if our sentence was, I prefer friends with whom I can be honest, obviously we cannot use that here, or clothes whose label are intact, we cannot say clothes that labels are intact. Right, now, there is another category, that's called relative adverbs, not pronouns, but they just name them relative adverbs. And this group consists of where, when, and why. And these three words give information about the adverbs of place, time, or reason. And that can replace when and why, but not where. Let's look at the examples. That was the date when, or the date that, they released their first album. That's the reason why, or that's the reason that, they're still together. This is the place where, but now we can't use that. This is the place where they first met. Again, another question that's common, I hear it often, is can we use which instead of the relative adverbs? Yes, but not on its own. If you use which, you need a suitable preposition as well. So now our sentence is going to be very complicated. Let me read the examples. That was the date on which they released their first album. And again, especially in British English, it's common to separate the preposition from the relative pronoun. You may also hear, that was the date which they released their first album on. Or the other example, this is the place in which they first met, or this is the place which they first met in. Again, given how complicated these sentences are, I'd recommend you avoid them and just stick to when, where, and why, right? Now, we have two other words we haven't looked at yet, and these are the words how and what. Are they relative adverbs too? No, they're not, because they cannot come after a noun. They replace both the noun and the relative pronoun. What means the thing which, and how means the way in which. And these two, they usually create noun clauses that can be the subject or object of a verb. For example, how Tony copes, this is the subject of the sentence, is a mystery. Or, I don't understand what she's saying. Now, that's the object of the verb understand. So these are two very special words. Be careful with them. So the final question I often get is, how about where, when, and why? Can they create noun clauses? And the answer is yes. If the context is clear, we can create noun clauses with where, when, and why as well. So instead of the place where you live matters, obviously where refers to a place, the word place is redundant. We can just say where you live matters. Where you live is the noun clause that has become the subject of the verb matters. Do you know the time when the train arrives? Obviously, when refers to the time, so we can drop time. Do you know when the train arrives? Here, again, we have created an object for the verb know. And the last example, I can't explain the reason why this is the case. Again, why always refers to a reason. So you can drop the word reason. I can't explain why this is the case. Again, this is now the object of the verb explain. Right, that's all the information I'd like to share in this lesson. But I'd like to end with a quick summary, because there was a lot of information and usage guide. So, first one, use who for people and that for objects. For example, I love people who smile and objects that shine. If you're in doubt, is it a person, is it an object? Use that. This is the committee that made this decision. Third thing to remember, avoid whom by moving the preposition away from it, especially in British English. So this is the boy who I was standing next. The fourth, for possessions, use whose for both people and objects. So the man whose house, and also the house whose roof. Continuing with the usage guide, do not use what and how after a noun. So avoid saying this is the object what, this is the object that, or this is what, or this is the way how. Just this is or that is how. The sixth one, avoid structures that involve preposition and which, because they are very complicated. So instead of the name of which, just say whose name. Instead of the school in which, just say the school where. And finally, drop the noun before where, when, and why if the noun adds no information. So why say this is the place where? Obviously, where refers to a place. So this is where I grew up. But if there is additional information in your noun, keep it. This is the small town where I grew up. Now we know that you grew up in a small town. Right, that's the summary and usage guide. I hope it's been helpful to you, and we'll have more information on this topic in our next session. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. For more on this topic, click here. Remember to also check out my complete online course, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching and happy studies!